It's an absolute pleasure to have all three of you here. And I'm going to kick off the first question to you, Dallas. So after the pandemic, it kind of forced a rapid shift to remote work, and many companies are considering hybrid models for right now and continuing on into the future. We know that the traditional compliance and heavy anti-harassment trainings focus largely on the physical workplace and face-to-face employee interaction. So how should employers be thinking about the role of anti-harassment training in this increasingly hybrid workforce? And how can they ensure that they're providing an effective training that isn't just kind of a check the box program?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I think the first step is to ensure that you have a well-rounded training program to begin with. So obviously you always want to start with a compliant training, but then you want to make sure that it is customized and current. And the customization and the currency or the freshness is where you can ensure that it's really tailored to the hybrid work environment that we are in right now. When we are going in and doing trainings with organizations, we ask them, are you currently all remote? Are you hybrid? Where are you at? So that we can really tailor our trainings to them. The way that we do that with our model is we use hybrid. In our trainings, we use hypotheticals. So we create scenarios that go over policies or typical issues that folks might really struggle with. And so we put hybrid work environments into those scenarios and ask folks to kind of wrestle with those so that they've already practiced ahead of time. But at this point, we have to acknowledge in our policies and in our trainings that this hybrid model is going to be around for a long time. And so what we've done is to adjust both the policies that we recommend and also included that hybrid information in our trainings. I think we have a hybrid hypothetical preloaded. Right. So this is one of the hypos that we would give, for instance. You and your direct supervisor both work extremely long hours and have quickly become close friends, often sharing details about lives outside your office. Your supervisor begins telling you over text about issues they're having with their spouse, including the fact that their spouse is no longer interested in having sex and they're thinking of having an affair. One day you have your camera off on Zoom and your supervisor laments that they're sad because they can't see your face. Is this a problem? So then we allow our participants to respond and we talk about why it's a problem, what parts of this are a problem, and what parts of this scenario need to change. We pull from the organization's individual policy. And really, it's all about customization to the unique individual company, compliance with the law, and just recognition that we are in really unique times. I think the worst thing that a company can do is not address that we are in this hybrid situation.
No, thank you so much for that, Dallas. That kind of brings me to my next question for Christina. As of 2021, only 17 of the 50 US states have a legal mandate in place that actually requires employers to provide their employees with sexual harassment training. And of these, only 6 states have legal mandates that apply to both the public and private sector. So Christina, in an effort to kind of uncover what kind of sexual harassment trainings are providing and how employees should respond to it, Talent LMS teamed up with the Purple Campaign last year to survey about 1,200 US employees. Can you walk me and the group through the research that you found and that the survey found?
Of course, and hi everyone, and thank you for having us. I think we have a couple of slides prepared that summarize a bit what the research showed us. Of course, what we can see from the first slide is that when it comes to educating employees on the fundamentals of workplace harassment and how incidents should be reported, it has had an overwhelmingly positive effect. 90% of people said that they're more aware of how to report an incident. They feel better informed about how the company handles sexual harassment incidents. They feel educated about what constitutes sexual harassment and more informed about the EEOC, their legal rights, how they should approach those kinds of things. And of course, this in turn has showed that it has a positive effect on the companies as well that provide the sexual harassment, because people feel more valued and are more likely to stay on the organization. But however, if we go on to the next slide, and this ties so much with what Dallas mentioned, there's a lot of people that responded that after receiving training, they feel more worried about getting in trouble, or what exactly would get them in trouble. Of course, an overwhelming amount of people said that it made them feel safer at work. But one really important point to make here is that the training needs to actually be practical, be tailored, and give examples as to what is sexual harassment, what do you need to do, just tie it to real life. There's a lot of companies out there that provide sexual harassment training as part of their compliance yearly schedule, and they just provide outdated material that don't really help anyone. So it's really important to take this piece of information and actually use it to help people feel safer and more comfortable at work.
Thank you so much, Christina. And my next question is for Liz to kind of dig a little bit deeper in these numbers as well. And so Liz, we kind of know that in 2021, 47.4 million people voluntarily quit their jobs. Additionally, recent studies have shown that most people believe a strong company culture will make them happier at work than earning a high salary. And as a result, there's been a shift in thinking about how we work and a reassessment of what really matters to employees. How has this shift caused by the Great Resignation presented employers with an opportunity to attract and onboard employees in a new way?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. So I guess the Great Resignation also means a lot of turnover, but turnover is also an opportunity to onboard people. And onboarding, as you all know, is a chance to introduce employees to your culture and how you handle these issues. And particularly if you want to take a different approach or build a new, different culture among your new employees, this is a great time to do it. And it's a great time to reevaluate what choices the company's making around what their policies are and how you're going to communicate those to the employee. So when you think about what it means to build trust with workers around harassment, I think transparency is really important. And when I think of transparency, what I mean is disclosing important information, but also being honest about it and being honest about your intentions and your purpose in designing a system in a particular way. Because workers already have a lot of distrust around these questions and a lot of anxiety. And by showing them that you're being forthright and honest about what you're doing, that can help build trust in you as an employer, you as in a workplace, and also in the system that you've designed for handling harassment. So one of the ways you can do that is through your harassment and discrimination policy, which I think, it's easy to think about those policies as a legal document, which you're distributing to your workers for legal purposes. I'm well familiar with that as a former employment lawyer. But policies are also an opportunity to educate your workers. So it is certainly possible and not, and I think there's every reason to force your lawyers to write a policy that your workers can understand and that conveys practical information to them. And that might even have a Q&A in it, right? And I also note that policies generally are not honest about what the legal standards is versus what your company policy is and the ways in which those may be a little bit different. It's very common for companies to have a policy that requires more of their employees than the legal standard, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. But I think you should say that to your workers and explain that this is our company value, or you're doing this to give yourself an opportunity to intervene before the problem gets worse, or this is the culture that you want to build. Whatever it is, I think you can be really clear, like this is our company value around anti-harassment discrimination, and this is the standard we're going to have for conduct, and this is the standard we're going to have for reporting and responding to harassment. It's also worth thinking about other honest assurances you can make to your workers about the way your policy works. For example, that having a really high position at the company or a powerful position at the company does not immunize you from accountability for violations of the harassment policy, for example, right? So what else can you tell your workers through your policy that will help build trust? Part of transparency also means telling them how the complaint process works. So as we saw with those TikTok videos, workers might assume that the process is very lengthy, or that the process is not responsive or won't hold people accountable at the end of the day. So part of building trust is just being really transparent about how it works. Here's what happens when you complain. Like, we write it down in the system. We ask you, if you want us to follow up. And if you do, here's how we generally conduct an investigation. Here are the consequences that attach for minor and major violations of the policy. And here's how long it will take us, and here's who we're going to talk to, and here's what's going to happen at the end, right? All of those things you totally can and should tell your employees. I think it's also valid to share overall company statistics with your workers, such as, here are the number of complaints we've had, right, in a given year. Just the average number of complaints we've seen. Here's how we respond. Here are the consequences that have flowed from those violations. Here's what happened to them. And be clear that your goal is not to have 0 complaints. Your goal is to have substantial complaints, right? Because you want people to feel comfortable complaining. And so the fact that there may be a lot of complaints doesn't mean it's bad. It means that the process is working as intended. I also think there's a role for transparency when it comes to harassment trainings themselves. Like, I think it's valid to tell your workers why you have a policy, why you have a training. Say, if you have a training because you are legally obligated to do so, you might as well tell them that, because they're just going to assume that anyways. And you can tell them, well, this is a legal requirement and we have to cover certain content, and there's other content that we designed ourselves that we think it's important to convey. Or this is a legal requirement, but we considered several training programs, and this was our favorite for the following reasons. Or we are designing this program not because it's a legal requirement, but we want you to know what our policy is, or we want you to know what the legal standard is, or we want you to know how to report a complaint, or we want you to know how to recognize harassment, or we want you to know how to intervene if harassment comes up. I think all those things, if you're honest with employees about why you're doing it, they're more likely to trust the content of what you're saying. And I think it's also important to give them choices about what kind of training they want. And if they want to do a training where, they're reading text and answering a quiz, let them do that. If they want a training where they're sitting down with HR and asking questions of HR in a group, I think that's fine. If they want to do a commercial online training, I think that's fine. I think the more choices that you can give workers, the more they'll buy into the content that you're giving.